All right, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you just finished up with the boys at Legal Curve who get right at it after the game and provide you with some post-game coverage, and we plan to continue it on here. Interesting night, big win if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan. Big win for that team as they are trying to stay above that playoff line. All of a sudden, they're just 3 points behind the Jets in the standings, and that Wednesday game looms large. Is very interesting. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So please, anywhere you're watching, you are able to leave your comments and your questions. I can bring them into the show. We can address them right here. So please bring that in. But first, before we get to that, we're going to get to my guy, Kenny, and I want to get your thoughts on the game. Kenny, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. Obviously, impressive recovery for the Montreal Canadiens. One schedule loss, let's say, to the Calgary Flames, but then they had that subpar showing on Saturday night in the return match. So our pal Eric Engels told me this afternoon the Canadiens would be sharp, and I think that they were. It's interesting for me, Sean. We always talk about how sometimes a team struggles in that first game back from a long road trip. Obviously, we talked about the Jets feeling so confident after going 3-1-1, but I don't think the Jets were overly poor in this game necessarily. Obviously, their puck management was a concern on each of the 3 goals before the empty netter, but overall, I think the Jets actually played a pretty sound game overall, but too many of the Claude Noel style free pizzas handed out tonight. Again, this isn't an effort issue. Obviously, the Jets left themselves in a couple of tough spots. Again, we've heard it so often from Paul Maurice, Sean. You can almost never find a piece of negative defensive zone tape on Andrew Kopp. This was just a bobbled puck. It wasn't even a bad decision. Puck just kind of rolled away from him in the neutral zone. And then Derek Forbort kind of got caught in no man's land. It was a 3-on-1 he was facing. But I think if he had been a little bit more assertive on the play, he might have been able to beat Josh Anderson to the puck. But again, that's easy to say from press box level. But I think if you look back at the tape, I think that would be something where he would be a little bit more aggressive on that play. Obviously, Josh Morrissey, his backhand clearing attempt was knocked down on the power play goal for the Canadiens from Josh Anderson, who I thought, again, very impressive game for Anderson. And Toffoli with the really good scoring chance right before that. Connor Hellebuyck makes a great pad save, just is unable to get the rebound. And then, too, just a bad bounce. I mean, a lot of fans think that Josh Morrissey just whiffed on that one-timer, but I think the puck bounced over his stick. And then Neil Pionk has been absolutely dynamite. Does not make a lot of errors. I think he was really forced heavily by Brendan Gallagher, and I think he actually might have got his stick on the puck there. So he didn't get an assist, I don't think, on the initial play, but Gallagher was a bit of a pest to the Jets all night long, and he did a really good job of forcing Pionk into that tough turnover there as well. And I mean, the Jets had some zone time, they had some chances, but I don't think they were able to generate enough in terms of the scoring chances against Carey Price and the Montreal Canadiens.
You mentioned sorry, I get a kick out of our viewers' comments. You mentioned Josh Anderson. If I'm the Habs, I really love his game tonight, and here's why. He was one of the guys who was a bit of a no-show in that second game against the Calgary Flames, which was clearly a big concern to that team. Yesterday, he comes into Winnipeg, and it's his Mark Messier moment. Not the same stage, but he comes in and says, like, we're going to be better and we're going to have our best tomorrow night. He didn't call a win, but he called a proper performance. And so for him to follow that up, that Montreal Canadiens lineup needs more of that. It's what's been missing from that team, in my opinion, for the last couple of years. They're a team that falls into funks and can't get out of them. They need a number of guys in that room who are the kind of guys who are going to walk in and say, enough's enough, we're going to be better, I'm going to be better, and then delivering on the ice like they did in that manner. You were talking about Brendan Gallagher and his play. This seemed to have like a bit of an old school hockey feel to me, this game. Nick Ehlers gets absolutely blown up by Romanov, and I think some people were concerned. You brought it up, and I do think you're right. The first point of contact is the head, but in the post game, Nick Ehlers saying that he thought it was an entirely clean hit. He just didn't know that Romanov was that
Incredible
solid,
answer.
which got us laughing. I mean, here he's like, okay, I'm okay with getting hit, until he figures out just how big of a hit that was. Speaking, or how hard that Romanov can hit. Speaking of big hits, Stanley absolutely blowing up. Was it Evans?
Jake Evans, yeah.
Jake Evans, yeah, just absolutely blowing him up. And then, I thought the Jets really, I was going back and forth with Eric Engels, who we had on our pregame show on Instagram, about Nick Suzuki and how the Jets were really kind of going after him. And I was wondering where the response was. I guess we got a little bit of one from Gallagher in that moment when he gets tied up with Pierre-Luc Dubois. But an old school hockey game, these are two teams that if I'm taking a look at all the teams that have played, it seems to me that if you're looking for a rivalry partner for the Winnipeg Jets, the Montreal Canadiens, to me, have been the closest fit I've seen in this North Division this year.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Sean. And I think we talked about, a little bit more bad blood. I think not necessarily in a negative way, but I think you saw a lot of intensity. I love the Ehlers' answer to my question, and I don't think it was a dirty hit either. I love the way that not only Nick Ehlers responded to the question, but also how he responded to the hit, Sean, that he took another run at Romanov on the same shift. Now, again, he didn't bowl him over or anything like that, but he showed the courage to go back at him, and then he got involved with Romanov all game long. Those two had a great battle, a cross-check back and forth battle out in front of the net. I really loved that response from Ehlers, and that's, if you're Paul Maurice, you're smiling about that. And if you're Paul Maurice, you're also smiling about the way that Logan Stanley continues to play with enormous confidence. I loved his game. There's a question, I think, from Blake at the Lake in there. I think that he's getting more confident every single time he gets onto the ice. His ability to get his shot through again tonight was exceptional. And we talk so much. He's a big, strong guy on the back end. And when he's assertive, much like Ben Sherratt when he was with the Jets, in those games when he's assertive, Logan Stanley can really be a physical force. I mean, again, I don't think that was a dirty hit either. It was a little bit of an awkward hit because Stanley kind of went at him with his back almost. It was almost like one of those Nicholas Kronwall hits, except it wasn't in the neutral zone. Jake Evans certainly took the brunt of the blow and went visor first into the boards. And also that drew a little bit of blood once the visor kind of connected with his nose. But I really like what I'm seeing from Logan Stanley. His confidence is on the rise, and you don't have to shelter him if you're Paul Maurice and Charlie Huddy. He's playing with a lot of confidence. I think that I thought Tucker Poolman has been a pretty steady partner for him in terms of the Jets' defense core. I mean, it wasn't their best effort. We know that. There's no doubt about it. The Morrissey-DeMello reunion was solid against the Leafs. They had a rough go tonight. I don't think that that's being harsh on them. I think that's just the reality.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more. But first, let's get into a running theme that just keeps going on and on in this show. Everyone is interested in Ken Wieb's mic. Ken, you gave me this microphone, and it's got a stand on it. I use that stand all the time. Is this one of those things where you just took a bullet for me and you don't have a stand for yours, and you thought, I'm going to be a good teammate and set Sean up to succeed, and you're come at me with the mic comments because people are no doubt coming at you?
They are, that's for sure. So we can only keep it's the rule of thirds, Sean. A third of the people were ticked off about the audio the first couple of nights.
Right.
A third of the people are sour about me holding on to the microphone like they used to do in the old days before the mic stand was invented. And now you just got to convince that middle third that don't really care to come to my side instead of worrying about the chirps that we've been getting. Folks, I am making the commitment to give you better audio, and we're definitely going to look into I'm not a very good handyman. I do think there are the pieces for the mic stand at home somewhere in a box. I'm just trying to find it, and we're going to get a mic stand taken care of.
I think you look like a Michael Bublé type crooner. You know what I mean? Bring in the mic and woo them. And that's what you've been doing. You've been wooing this audience. So give it to Kenny Wiebe. Let's explore, because again, and we love to joke about this, in our pregame before the last game, Ken, and not just in that pregame, but game after game after game, Ken has been calling for a DeMello and Morrissey reunion. He got it, and someone, Ken had talked about beating the drum for it, and I'd said beating the drum, it's more like one of those giant mallets, like those hammers, a sledgehammer, and you hit the gong with it. That's what he's been doing. So you got what you asked for tonight. You can see in the comments a lot of people thinking that didn't work out that well. Dig in a little deeper on that line, what you saw from them and what maybe wasn't working.
Yeah, I think that it was a rough night. We've talked about this before. The Canadian speed has given the Jets difficulty in the past in numerous games. I think they're very tenacious on the forecheck. I think that we saw it all night long. That Nick Suzuki line, he was getting beaten up tonight, but he kept going back at the Jets. I love that about this young player. I really enjoy watching him play. His move that he made, a stop and go, that he moves the puck not through the feet of DeMello, but he gets him to commit with his stick right at that time. He slides it in between the stick and the skates, goes around him, gets a really good scoring chance. It was just a tough night for DeMello and Morrissey. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I don't know that there were specific reasons. I just think that they had a little bit of trouble handling some of the things that the Canadians do well offensively. Josh Morrissey, I think, did pick up a couple of assists, but it was not his best game, and I think that Josh would be the first person to tell you that. But I think this potential pairing needs more than 4 or 5 period sample size before we turn the page on it. We did see one example of Pionk out with Morrissey for that offensive zone shift.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, too. I mean, you can think whatever you want about the importance of faceoffs, but there was a stretch there where the Jets just kept winning them. Paul Stastny in there winning. Adam Lowry comes in. They were able to generate a lot from that low to high opportunities, but they weren't able to get enough traffic in front of Carey Price. We just talked about it on our post game TV digital hit.
Watch out for that, people.
Price did a great job of battling through the screens, and I don't think the Jets got enough traffic in front of Carey Price. And when Price is locked in, you either have to get him going side to side, or you need to get you got to take away his eyes. And the Jets did do a nice job of having some of those extended offensive zone shifts, and that's something we didn't see a whole lot at times early on in the year, but we've been seeing it a lot more recently. And from there we'll see where it goes. But I think we've talked about this so much, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but what happened to the Toronto Maple Leafs after they had a 13-1 composite score against the Edmonton Oilers? They went out and lost 2 in a row to the Vancouver Canucks, a team that we thought was down and out in Beverly Hills. So that's sort of what the Jets, it's not taking the Jets off the hook by any stretch. Their puck management needed to be better. There's no doubt about that. But in terms of their structure, I mean, I think the Jets did a pretty good job of taking away the high volume. I mean, they had 31 shots? I think 31 shots for the Canadians, empty net goal. I think overall, this wasn't one of those nights where the Jets were hemmed in their own end and the Canadians were buzzing and shooting from everywhere. It was just a matter of they were very opportunistic. I mean, hey, the Jets know all about opportunism and being opportunistic. Let's get serious here. There's some nights where they rely on that finishing ability, and tonight the opposite happened to them. So, I mean, we'll see what happens in the rematch. But again, we expected the Canadians to have a desperate effort, and they played very solid. But at the same time, the Jets were right there. Their power play, once again, looked very good. 2 big goals from Kyle Connor. We talk about net front. Blake Wheeler providing a very important screen on that first Kyle Connor goal, and then Connor with just an absolute rocket on that one-timer.
Yeah.
And again, I hate to do this to you, Sean, because you're often right, but in the pregame show, we talked about the debate between Ehlers and Connor in that spot, in the one-timer spot.
You dare. So you're going here? You sure?
I do have to slide that in there quickly.
The war is on.
But
Let's go.
But I also did say that I would be interested in seeing Ehlers in that high slot position at times where Paul Stastny is. So I just wanted to slide that in. Your predictions have been excellent. You had the score or close to the score, and you had the team correct tonight, but I did need to get a quick one in there.
Yeah, well, okay, so for those who missed it, in our Instagram pregame shows, which if you're not checking them out, you should go check them out because they're similar to this, and we love our audience interaction. The point that I was making was how I had a line afterwards, but it's
the zone entry machine.
Enough with the dangling the carrot for Nick Ehlers.
Sure.
Give the guy some carrots. Let the guy eat some carrot. And a carrot that I think that would be a payoff for all the hard work and all the advancements you've seen from his game. When that first line, with that first power play unit wasn't going, why not switch out Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers and let Nick Ehlers take a couple of cracks at that one-timer that you saw coming from Kyle Connor tonight. Give Nick Ehlers a crack at those zone entries and jumping in and out. And I still think that. I still think that there's a place for, if you're looking to give guys incentive for playing a certain way, that's one of the things they could have done for Nick Ehlers. Now, Nick Ehlers looks like the kind of guy who doesn't necessarily need that, so maybe you don't have to go in that direction. But I don't know. I think I'd like to see it anyways, a payoff for a guy doing a certain something. And I say that before the game, and then Kyle Connor goes out and buries a couple, and then you've got a partner who will just stick it to you when it happens. So that's just choose your partners carefully is the rule of thumb that comes out of this. I want to get back
to... Let's go to this here.
Which one? Well, click on it. You know how to...
I just did.
Okay, there we go. All right, good. LB Wednesday, Bucky Thursday. Is that where we're going?
No, yes, that's where we're going, but that's not where the Jets are going, Tom. I understand your point of view here, but the Jets just got Connor Hellebuyck some rest. He needs to get back into rhythm. So rhythm for him means starting consecutive games. I don't think that Hellebuyck was the problem for the Jets tonight. Did Price outplay him? Well, on the scoreboard he did, but Hellebuyck also turned away a penalty shot and made some other saves. So I don't think this was a goaltending issue for the Jets. Laurent Brossoit has been excellent in the backup role, but generally speaking, the backup plays the back end of the back-to-back. That's the way it works under most circumstances. And Brossoit always enjoys playing against the Oilers. It was the team he broke into the NHL with after that trade from the Calgary Flames. So I think we're going to see that's the area we're going to see. Yeah, we're going to see Hellebuyck again Wednesday, and you're going to see Brossoit Thursday. Or that is my prediction anyways. Let's go quickly to the standings here, Sean. I think there's a comment about Calgary. Calgary roars back to win 4-3 tonight, 3 in a row under Darryl Sutter. You talk about things getting tight in the North Division. We spent a lot of the day talking about the Jets potentially being in first place by the time the week is over. Well, now they've got the Canadiens in hot pursuit and the Flames just 2 points behind the Montreal Canadiens. So I think this is going to be an exceptional second half. I mean, maybe let's go there for a little bit. What stands out to you, Sean, about where the Jets stand at the midway point of this NHL season?
I mean, the biggest thing that I take away from how the Jets are playing is they don't have these extended losing streaks like other teams. Toronto hadn't had it. Now all of a sudden they are seemingly lost in the woods in a bit of a spot here, having lost 5 of their last 6 games. Right now, if the Montreal Canadiens win the next game, all of a sudden there's 1 point separating the Montreal Canadiens and the Winnipeg Jets, and things start getting tight and it gets tough, and all of a sudden that look that you were on your way to pushing and catching up with the Toronto Maple Leafs, that disappears into thin air once that happens. But in order for that to happen, the Jets have to lose back-to-back games, and they just have not done that this year. And the one thing that I appreciate about the way they've been able to play is to find that extra gear in those games. Now, it brings me back to something we were talking about that I didn't think we fully explored, and I want to get back to. But the Montreal Canadiens, by our estimation, are the first team this season to beat the Jets twice in a row. Not back-to-back, but the Montreal Canadiens won 7-1 the last time they played them. They beat them now 4-2. It's the first time it's happened. And the one thing that I always find interesting with a coach like Paul Maurice, who rarely shows his hand, has showed the hand quite often, not just this season, but in years past, about how disconcerted he is about how his team plays against the Montreal Canadiens. And if you take a look tonight, I'm with you. I don't think that the Jets played a bad game. I didn't think the Canadiens outplayed them. It's one of those games where a few bounces, it could go in a different direction. But I do think that the Canadiens do a really good job of interrupting the Jets in the neutral zone. I asked Nick Ehlers about it, a guy who usually flies through that neutral zone. You don't see it happening as much against a team like the Montreal Canadiens. You see them turn over a lot of pucks and knock them down like the Jets are able to do. And the other part about it is they seem to be able to take that pressure off in their own zone and exit the zone, find ways to get out of the zone against the Jets that other teams just don't seem to have. I find that the Jets are able to sew other teams into their end zone a lot easier than they are against this Montreal Canadiens team. So their explanation of it is that this Canadiens team is just fast. They don't overwhelm you by force. They do it by speed. They do it with really good sticks. They do it with good positioning. Is that assessment bang on for you?
Absolutely, Sean. And the other thing that the Canadians do extremely well is prevent you from getting to the blue paint in front of the net. That's one thing that with a big and strong defense core, that's one thing they do exceptionally well. So I've been impressed by that. I thought here, Joel Edmondson steps in for Ben Sherrod, who's going to miss, I think, 6 to 8 weeks with a broken hand or fractured hand. I mean, tough break for him after getting in that tilt with JT Miller. Reminds me so much of, back in 2015, Ben Sherrod. He's finally getting a chance to play with Dustin Byfuglien. He's playing in his home province against the Leafs, drops the gloves with Daniel Winnick, wraps him on the helmet, and breaks his hand and misses, several weeks or maybe a month and change. And just a tough break. But again, this is why Marc Bergevin went out and got Joel Edmondson. He wanted to have a little more bite on the back end, even when you lose a guy like Sherratt. Now Edmondson slides into that top four pairing with Shea Weber and does a great job. The other part of that, Romanov, we talked about him earlier. I've really enjoyed his game and the games that we've seen here against the Jets. This is a impressively skilled player who plays with bite. I love what I've seen from him. Skates well, shoots well. He's going to be a force for years to come on the back end for the Canadians. Let's dig into the fourth line quickly here and maybe Jansen Harkins.
Yeah, because that keeps coming up over and over and over again.
And I am absolutely riveted about whether Jansen Harkins gets an opportunity on, I don't know if it'll come Wednesday, but what about Thursday? In this stretch of games, Sean, with 17 in 31 days in March, this is the time when you need a guy like Jansen Harkins to come in and give your group a boost. We know that Nate Thompson is in the lineup because he's a veteran presence. I think that getting Harkins an opportunity at center in one of those games would help both players. I think Harkins is itching to get back into the lineup, and I think that you play Harkins or you play Thompson Wednesday against his old team again, and then you put Harkins in against the Oilers. You get some fresh legs in there, and then Thompson's ready again for that Saturday night game against the Oilers in the rematch, and then see what happens. I don't think he's going to take out both Lewis and Thompson at the same time, but we'll see how it goes.
Montreal's a high-volume shot team. I'm interested in this comment here. Montreal didn't really get a whole lot, except the Jets couldn't stay on their feet. They blow a tire, and the Canadians got the puck, and boom. Was there? So I've explored this option in the past about the Winnipeg Jets and how they're able to be opportunistic in games that they may not be the better team on that night, but they're able to get the opportunities and cash in on those opportunities. And I'd wondered about their ability to maybe survive a push, but when they do get those opportunities, and I thought that the second game against the Leafs where they probably steal a point in that overtime, that's the game I think Nick Ehlers has the 2 goals. I mean, those are 2 phenomenal scoring chances that are right in the wheelhouse of that line. They couldn't ask for a better scoring opportunity for that line, and I wonder when I see this comment here, and I heard a little bit of it online as well before about the Montreal Canadiens. It's just a matter of the Jets blew a tire, they did this, a couple of dumb plays, but this is what losses to the Montreal Canadiens look like, is it not? They force you into mistakes. They create scenarios by which you are always dealing with pressure, and maybe you handle it through the majority of the night, but at some point that pressure is going to expose you, and it's going to expose you big time when it does. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, tonight, the Jets had the lead in high danger chances, I think 12-10 here, and everything they did was pretty steady. But again, they just ran into a Canadiens team that was desperate and opportunistic. So, of course, the Jets would like to generate more 5-on-5. I think with a team that has that much offensive ability and capability, I think they needed to do a little bit of better job in terms of their generation. We've spent a lot of time talking after Canadiens games where the Jets really struggled in their defensive zone. I didn't see that being a major issue today, except for the puck management. And again, it's not like the Jets had a ton of turnovers, but the three main ones that they had ended up in the back of the net. So, of course, they can do things better. I think there were times when the Jets had opportunities, they just didn't cash in as many as they could, and exactly that's what we've talked about a lot. There's just not enough traffic, and when Carey Price seems to be locked in now after the change. Again, this is not to pin the blame on Stefan Waite or anything like that, but since the goaltending coach change, he has been better. I mean, since the coaching change, he's been better. So it seems like Carey Price has had a bit of a weight lifted off his shoulders. And
Agreed.
when Carey Price is plugged in and playing the way that we know Carey Price can play, he's a problem for teams around the National Hockey League and specifically in the North Division. I mean, we talked a lot about Connor Hellebuck's ability to be the great equalizer. When Price plays the way that he did against the Pittsburgh Penguins in the playoffs in the bubble last year, he causes problems for teams, and he was a big reason why the Canadiens were able to push the Philadelphia Flyers in that series that followed.
Now, there was a comment earlier on in the show about someone saying it's the Jets post-game show, not the Canadiens post-game show. We're always going to give you lots of Jets content. That's what we're here for, and yes, that's the first and foremost team. We're going to go in other directions, and especially on a year like this year, because every time the Jets see an opponent, that opponent, we know they're going to see them down the road, and it's going to mean something. So the fact that we go and we dig into a guy like Price, like we're doing right now, or we dig into Foley, or the way that this team forechecks or whatever, the entire purpose of doing it is so that we can get a good grasp on who these teams are, so that the next time we see these teams, we can understand what we're seeing and what the Jets need to do better. So please just have patience with us when we're talking about the other team. It's not that we're trying to, because we work for Sportsnet, TSN gets it too. It's always the Toronto factor, and people, I can't tell you, Ken, I'm born in a hospital an hour out of Winnipeg in the town of Pinawa, 1,500 people. You don't get any more Manitoban than me, and I can't tell you how many times, every time I talk about the Jets, I get I don't know if it's a bot or someone saying, like, stick to Toronto boy. It's like, I'm not from Toronto. I'm as Manitoba as it gets. But we dig into these things, especially this season, because it's going to matter what these conversations about Price down the road. And I'll finish off. We were talking about Price. The one thing I really liked about him and his response tonight was that second goal that Kyle Connor scores when he blows it by him. His posture after he gets scored on, he moves over, he misses the shot. It's in the net. It's a gorgeous shot. He kind of just slides out of the net, and he knows he's beat. But his response to me reminds me of Connor Hellebuck when Connor Hellebuck is on his game, or when, even maybe more so, when Connor Hellebuck lets one of those terrible, and he doesn't do it a lot, but I mean, you go back to Chris Tanev scoring from over center ice, the look of confidence that they have. I take a look, if I'm the Montreal Canadiens, and all of a sudden the Winnipeg Jets, who you cannot contain, who always come back and score their way back into a game and quite often win it in overtime, that team is making its push. And if I look at my goalie in that moment and I see him throw his head up in the air or drop his head down, that makes a difference. And in that moment, I take a look at Carey Price. He showed nothing but confidence, and I think that matters to that team and on that bench. Let's explore the idea of 5-on-5 more, a little bit deeper, because when we just did our Sportsnet hit, which everyone should go check out, I made the claim that I think for the last 5 games, the Jets have been outplayed at 5-on-5. Kyle Connor said tonight after the game they need to be better at 5-on-5. Paul Maurice said he didn't necessarily agree. Where do you fall in this debate?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, I think there were times where the Jets looked, very good in the offensive zone and were able to sustain some pressure, but they didn't get enough from that home plate area for me, Sean, at 5-on-5, and that is an area, because of the weaponry that they employ, you just expect them to create more. I mean, here's part of the problem. So the Jets have this great highly entertaining 3-game series with Toronto. In 2 of the games, they're having some issues defensively, to the point that Paul Maurice said they've had a lot of practice at it. Hopefully they can be better at it in the 3rd game. Then the Jets play their best defensive game of the year, smothering style, but then they come home and give up 4 to the Montreal Canadiens, who, again, people think naturally, if you can beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, 2 out of 3 and get to overtime in the other, you should be able to handle teams that are below them in the standings. But if it were that simple, hockey would be an easy game. So,
Yeah.
again, we said this before off air, Sean. I mean, this would be another outstanding playoff series if these two teams would want to go head to head in the first round per se.
Yes.
I mean, it'd be fantastic. They're evenly matched teams. Calgary and Winnipeg, evenly matched teams. Often Vancouver and Winnipeg, even though Winnipeg has dominated a nice stretch of that had, whatever it was, a 10-game winning streak. Those games are close. They're often one-goal games. As we've talked about so often this year, there's a lot of talent in the North, and every team has one or two flaws that they have to overcome. They also have an inordinate amount of talent. So whoever's hot on a certain night, who is generally going to win. I mean, sometimes you get special teams, sometimes you get a bounce. I mean, here's the thing. The Jets are in second place in the North. They could soon be in fourth if they don't have a good week. But they could also be close to first. So I would say the beauty of hockey is that you love to hear the passion and the expectations, but the facts of the matter are the Jets are not going to win every game. And that was... The Canadians have played them tough all year, Sean. And even though the Jets are ahead in the season series, 2 of those games have gone to overtime. And you could probably argue that in another one, the Canadians deserved to win, and then they collapsed and lost 6-3. So these games are going to be tight, and you always are looking for that response. The Jets now 7-0-1 after a loss.
Yeah.
Can they continue to be one of the few teams in the NHL that has not lost consecutive games in regulation? Guess what? 2 days we're going to find out.
Yeah, Jets have won more of these games against the Canadians, but is it 6 points to 6 points right now? I believe.
Because they went to overtime twice.
Overtime. So overtime twice, 2 wins for the Habs, 3 wins for the Jets. So, I mean, points-wise, which I guess really in this division this year, that's what matters most. These two teams are now even. And again, it's another thing that I said in our post-game. And maybe it's an unfair comment because Toronto manhandled the Jets in their first game and in the of the year, and then in this 3-game set, the first 2 games looked like they roundly outplayed the Jets, although the results didn't come in that direction. But I do think that matchup-wise, this Montreal team, I feel, has shown me enough that I think they're the best matchup against the Jets in this division. Okay, you're going to get to this. I was going to go in this direction too. I want to talk about Heinola. Because, again, and we talked about Maurice in certain situations not wanting to show his cards. That's even take that 100 times further when you're talking about Kevin Cheveldayoff, who came out and spoke with us today. When people ask me about how close Kevin Cheveldayoff keeps his cards to his chest, I say he's got a pocket on the inside of his vest, and that's where he keeps them. That's how close it is to his chest. He just does not let anything go. But one thing that I've seen from him time and time again is he loves Ville Heinola, and I think that he is amazingly proud, as he should be, of the deal that he made when he sent Jacob Trouba down the road, not only in getting Neil Pionk, but he'll remind you, never mind what Neil Pionk is doing. We still have Ville Heinola coming, and people are excited to see him for good reason. I don't know that any Jets fan out there is as excited to see Ville Heinola as Kevin Cheveldayoff is.
Yeah, I mean, Heinola is a guy who has enormous upside, and the thing for right now is that he needs to keep playing. He had a long stretch between games. He had only the 1 game against Ottawa where he was very solid. This is a young player with a lot of skill. He's a great puck mover. He would help the Jets once he's ready in an area where they need help, which is clean exits and puck moving ability, which is something that the Jets have some issues with at times when things aren't going well. What we heard from Kevin Cheveldayoff today is that the Jets are open for business. They're doing their due diligence. We know they're out scouting, whether it's in the buildings or on video. We know there's pro meetings and amateur meetings coming up. We know the discussions are happening. We know that the quarantine rules will not deter the Jets from making a move if the price is right and the player fits. What level of buy-in or pushing of the chips to the middle are we going to see? That we don't know yet. But again, Kevin Cheveldayoff wouldn't be telling us that the Jets need to get a top-pairing guy or they're not going to be able to win. I mean, general managers just don't operate that way. Do we expect the Jets to be making calls on Matthias Ekholm, David Savard, Travis Hamonic, absolutely. But Kevin Cheveldayoff also mentioned about the internal option factor. And we know that even though we expect Dylan Samberg to probably need to wait until next season, Ville Heinola, I don't think, is in that camp fully. It's possible he has to wait, but I don't think so. I think there will, depending on what happens with the deadline, I think we'll have an opportunity to see Ville Heinola again before the year is over. I don't think that burning the first year of the ELC is a consideration or a concern. Of course, you have to consider it because that's what the future brings, but it's not going to deter them once they feel Heinola is ready and ready to graduate from the American League Hockey or American Hockey League level. He can be a dominant player at that level. We know the only thing holding him back is his defensive zone play, and that's something that he's committed to doing. He's gotten better at it. He has pro experience in Liga, and I think once they call this player up, he's going to graduate full time. And that's the one thing from my conversations with Pascal Vincent about Logan Stanley in years past. That's what he always said. You know, he's coming along, but we want to make sure that he's ready, that when he makes the jump, he doesn't come back. Same with Jansen Harkins. Once he was ready, don't worry about it. Pascal Vincent said, we're not going to see you again. That was the other thing. So yeah, I think patience, I understand it's incredibly hard, but Rasmus Sandin was the top defenseman, I think, 2 years ago at the World Junior. He's still with the Toronto Marlies.
Right.
So you got to be patient. Jamie Drysdale was the other all-star defenseman at the World Junior. He's in San Diego, I think, right now, still not quite with Anaheim. So when you have an undersized player like Heinola, yes, he's played pro hockey. Yes, we know he has a lot of ability, and I think we're going to see that ability before this year is over. But I think whatever it is, if it's 15 games, 20 games, 25 games, whatever it is, of playing 20 to 25 minutes will help Heinola. I had an opportunity to see him earlier this year. I think last month I went and watched the Moose play. He was very good. He has some things to learn defensively, but he's, again, committed to doing those things. So I think you got to be patient, and there will come a time, I think, sooner than later, when Heinola tries to make his mark with the Jets back end.
I'm interested in this comment here, Kenny. Jets are keeping him down so they get an extra entry-level year for Heinola. That idea, I mean, those are the kind of things that GMs have to take into account, right? I mean, if you're going to bring him up and he's going to be the planner, you're going to go get a guy, that's a very real cost of going to Ville Heinola as an option. Never mind the fact that you're trying to bring in a guy who has yet to play full-time in the NHL and asking big things from him in a playoff setting.
Yeah, I think it's a consideration, but I don't think it would prevent the Jets from calling him up if they believe he can make that difference on the back end. That's why we saw him earlier in the year. And again, I don't think that it's a matter of the Jets are definitely going to keep him down. I think this is more about making sure the player is ready. The Jets are trying to win. If they believe that Ville Heinola makes them a better team and that he's ready for the full-time work, then they're going to call him up. I don't see it as a deterrent. Is it a consideration? Sure. I mean, that's the other part. We can apply this to Christian Vesalainen. I mean, the year that he went back to play in the KHL for Jokerit, I mean, that helped the Jets in some ways because it didn't burn a year of his ELC. Yes, he started in the NHL, and yes, he spent time with the Moose, but he was able to go back. So, again, I think it's, of course, the general manager has to consider that, but I don't think it would deter the Jets from bringing Heinola up once they believe that he's ready. And again, sometimes I understand a lot of people think that he might be overripe, but I think there are still things for him to learn at the American League level. It's a good league, and he can dominate at that level, and once he does that, he's going to come to the NHL level and fit in smoothly, I think.
See, I wonder how much of this is posturing. I mean, basically, if you're a opposing GM who's out there right now, if you're David Poyle, and there's been conversations about Ekholm, what you're hearing from Kevin Cheveldayoff today was, if a deal fits and if the price is right, we'd be willing to make that deal. And what you heard from him also was, don't forget, we've got options on the Moose that we could bring up. But how much of that is posturing? Because if you're saying that, yeah, if he can help this team, you bring him up. And I agree with that 100%. But if you go get a guy who's ready to go right now, that you know what to expect, and I mean, you're the guy who's been leading the charge, beating the drum on that. Sorry, I don't want to make it sound like you're cheering on it, but you brought up the idea of bringing up Ekholm, and I think both you and I, having watched Ekholm play on those great National Predators teams, know what he would bring to this team. They know what an advantage his salary is. We know what an advantage it is to have him for this season and the next season. It's huge in that regard. So if you can make that deal, and again, yeah, I mean, of course, you're gonna go pick up anyone if the price is right. If someone gives you a bargain basement deal, that's not what's going to happen. The decision that has to be made here is spend big dollars or big assets on a guy like that, who you know what you are going to get from him, and you know he can help this roster where they need it most, or bring up potentially a guy like Heinola, who is a risk because you don't necessarily know how he's going to react. So that's the choice. So we've set the parameters. How much of this is posturing and him trying to say to other GMs, we don't need it that bad. You're going to have to come down in price for us to go there because we can always go in that direction. But how much of this is the Jets are in a really good spot and are never going to have this clear of a path to the Stanley Cup final, and they need to make a deal this year, keeping in mind that this is a GM who has made deals now for 3 straight years in the past to better this team.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, yes, we know that Kevin Cheveldayoff was viewed as conservative and maybe even risk-averse for a long time, but he made the biggest blockbuster deal of the season.
He's not
in the
anymore.
NHL this year.
He's not risk-averse anymore.
No, and he's not afraid to push the chips to the middle, but there are a lot of considerations. I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. I've written about it. Man, Ekholm just fits perfectly with the Jets. And I mean, he fits perfectly with the window they have. But again, it's all about cost. And can you go out and win the bid again? I mean, if you're Toronto, you also feel this is your best chance. Are you willing to part with Nick Robertson? And if you are, I mean, I think that Heinola is untouchable. I think the other part of this too, how about next year, the way that Logan Stanley's playing, not only are you making room for Heinola and Dylan Sandberg, and you also got to have room for Stanley. So that's 3 spots with young defensemen.
Right.
So for me, that increases the likelihood of wanting to push a few more chips in for Ekholm, because you want to have a 30, 31-year-old experienced, big, strong, physical puck mover.
For sure. To
stabilize,
show those guys the way.
For sure. And then you have Josh Morrissey and you have Neil Pionk. I mean...
Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to ask you a quick question here. We've talked about the PLD deal and sending both Roslovic and Laine, and I think there's a bit of an agreement that there was an overpay by the Jets, but an overpay by necessity, because to your point, other teams were offering big packages. The Jets needed to offer the biggest package to get the guy that they wanted. So knowing that they did that once already this year, does it make it less likely or more likely that they overpay this year to get who they want and get the guy in place that they think puts them in the best position?
Yeah, for me, Sean, the terminology I would use is win the bid. I mean, I don't think it's an overpay necessarily, but again, you did have to give up a lot. So I mean, again, it's just a matter of the wording, I guess. I'm not shooting down the theory. They definitely have to win the bid. I mean, if you can't win the bid, you're not going to get the player. So I don't think that it would be a deterrent for them. But again, what we talked about earlier, with the expansion draft looming, and now with the Jets, running into some situations where, I mean, Mason Appleton is having such a great coming out party, if you will, in terms of his play. The Jets got to find a way to protect him as well. And then what about the pending UFAs that are guys you want to bring back if you're the Jets? I mean, Paul Stastny, we've talked about the fit. You got to have Paul Stastny. I mean, they're going to do everything in their power to keep Paul Stastny. Same goes for Adam Lowry, but you can't protect everybody. So if you already think you might have to give up an asset in order to make a side deal with Seattle, man, now you're moving a first-round pick plus a prospect and maybe a secondary prospect. It's the acquisition cost is added to that because of the expansion draft. So again, it has to be a consideration. It won't be a deterrent, but it has to be something that you do think about.
Is there a way to keep Mason Appleton without making a side deal? That's probably the only way it happens. Let's explore.
Well, they have room right now, but that means you're not protecting Lowry or Stastny, who you probably want to sign at least one of them, if not both,
right,
to an extension beforehand.
See, I wonder about these side deals. I was on the CJOB pregame the other day with John Shannon, who I used to work with. I did a draft with him when he was with Sportsnet, and I liked something he'd said is, the one thing the lesson he believed a lot of GMs learned from that first go around with Vegas, after it was all said and done, was in the end you're only losing one player, right? You may lose a player that you do not want to lose, but sometimes losing, like, look at the deals that needed to be made to save some of the players that they were trying to keep from going to Vegas. I mean, so in a lot of cases, they sent better players to Vegas to keep the one guy they thought was the better player. I mean, I liked John's idea that it's one player. It's going to suck, but this is how it goes. You get into a position where you're starting to send too many assets down the road. I mean, if you're trying to keep Appleton, do you send Harkins and Niku? Is that what it takes in a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, we don't know what we know that George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon did an unreal job of using leverage in order to get great players in both in expansion and in terms of those side deals. I mean, Alex Tuck continues to, excel. I mean, he's having one of the best years of his career. The fact that they were able to force the Ducks to give them Shea Theodore. Well, I know,
instead of Josh Manson.
We'll help you out here. But it's going to cost you your best prospect. I mean, they got 2/3 of their top line from the Florida Panthers.
Exactly. To protect who? Who was it?
Alex Petrovic on the back end, because they were lacking size. I mean, come on. I mean, you're right. You have to be careful. Yes, you know that you're going to lose a good player. That's the way expansion works. But you have to know what's happening here. And you don't overthink it. I mean, that's the thing that happens. You start thinking, oh man, you can't lose this because of that. But the Jets do have some backing in terms of their forward prospects. They have David Gustafsson coming, Vesalainen showing he can play. You know that Harkins he's already knocking on the door. So you have to be careful in what you're going to do. But again, we also know that the other thing that factors in for the Jets, Andrew Kopp is a year away from unrestricted free agency unless he signs a multi-year extension next year. So, I mean, yes, Mark, the Jets did do a good job in terms of their side deal with Vegas.
But did they?
Well, in one
who's the player who goes in their
spot?
But
the player that went 13th was on display
Nick Suzuki.
Tonight. Exactly. So, and it did cost them, I think, also a 4th-round pick. So, it wasn't as simple as just moving down in the draft. And again,
I mean, the one thing that would be nice is and he won't, because he says they're what's the word I'm looking for? They're sacred. The draft.
Yeah, the list.
They won't trade.
We're not going to let you know. We haven't let you know yet, and we're not going to let you know now.
And the interesting part about it is, I mean, I went down. I've done a bunch of games in Dallas. Just the way it's worked out with the Jets being in the Central Division, I got sent down to cover a couple of Montreal games for Hockey Night in Canada when I was there, and then you and I were both on a playoff series with them. I mean, they're telling me guys on the list all the time. They're saying, we had this guy here, we had this guy here. I know they don't do that. I know they don't do that here, and I get it. But it would be interesting to go back and kind of see. I mean, we say, hey, yeah, Nick Suzuki went in that spot. That's the player you could have had. We don't know if the Jets would have picked him there. We don't know. And the one thing that I always find about the Jets too, and this is a conversation we have all the time, I think one of the things, I know that there's people out there, fire Paul Maurice, there's a lot of that going on out there, but I think one of the things that you can't really argue with Paul Maurice is that is the heights that individual heights players have reached under his tutelage. I mean, Blake Wheeler becomes Blake Wheeler under him. Mark Scheifele, and again, I'll go down the list. It's Ehlers and it's Connor. All of these players, if you're talking about the guys that you can say that he's missed on, it's like Nick Patan and maybe Sami Niku. You could talk about Vesalainen right now, but we haven't seen where he's going to go. So the one thing about that list is, if we get a Vesalainen, who knows what Vesalainen is going to turn into? Maybe it isn't a miss, and maybe in that spot they wouldn't have picked Nick Suzuki, but they would have taken another player who's somewhere right now not succeeding that the Jets would have turned into a star. We never know. We never know with those situations. It's such a what if, but you could say before this year when the Jets were constantly trying to solve that second line center problem, Nick Suzuki could have been that solution if they would have gone down that road.
Oh, for sure. And that gives a perfect segue here to the question.
Yes.
I
want
wouldn't
to
call
tackle.
Stastny. I wouldn't call Stastny expendable. He's playing on the top line, and as much as I have enjoyed watching what Cole Perfetti's been able to do with the Manitoba Moose, there's no chance Cole Perfetti is going to be on the first line with the Winnipeg Jets next year. And that's not a knock on Cole Perfetti. This is a guy that just turned 19 years old on January 1st, and he's going to play at maximum. Maybe what is it going to be? 40, 50 games at the most in his 18-year-old development year.
Right.
I'm sorry, you can't count on Cole Perfetti being ready for next year's training camp, which is going to be in September.
Well, and never mind that. You cannot expect Cole Perfetti or probably any other kid in that draft, and I'm including Tim Stützle, to be able to do what Paul Stastny does. And we've talked about this. I mean, in my opinion, the Jets window is open now. So you need players who are ready to perform now. So we can say whatever we want about Cole Perfetti, who I believe is going to be a great player in the league. But he's not going to be Paul Stastny in probably the next 3 years. So, what you're looking at with Stastny is a player you want to keep around because what he can do for you right now gives you the best possible chance to capitalize on the window that's open right now.
Yeah, and Perfetti is a great comparison also, Sean. I mean, here you have a guy with incredible hockey intelligence, a guy who loves and has passion for the game. I mean, Perfetti is what you want. You want him to become what Stastny has become. That's the whole deal. And that's why you want Stastny around on another 1-year deal, even if it's just to have him around for training camp. I mean, these are two guys. We talk about how Mark Scheifele and Paul Stastny want to talk about hockey.
Yeah.
Imagine what those conversations that Cole Perfetti would be having with Paul Stastny about, and how big a benefit that would be for him to be able to have that resource at his disposal before he's ready. And again, I think it's possible that Cole Perfetti might even get a couple games at the start of next year, depending on how the summer goes. But you can't bank on him to be a top 6 player next year. I just don't see that happening. That you're just not putting the player in a position to succeed based on a tough pandemic year. So, but again, he's the kind of guy that the Jets want to, eventually turn into a Paul Stastny type. So he's a great player. I love what I've seen from him. I've had great conversations with him, Sean. We've talked about it to him. This guy loves hockey, exudes hockey, and wants to continue to get better. He's going to have another great year of training after his year is over, and then see what happens from there. But I want to dive on this one here quickly. This is a great premise that you and I have talked about, but you and I have also talked about the potential ramifications and consequences. That it's great to say that in theory, but what happens after the Seattle expansion draft? Seattle is not going to have any cap issues based on their roster. They're the only team that a flat cap doesn't really impact, or it wouldn't be unless you knowingly take big dollar contracts on your own books. So, and that's not just the Jets won't only be competing with Seattle for the services of Adam Lowry and Paul Stastny. They're going to have to pay them market value, even in a flat cap world. So do you want to run the risk in a perfect world for the Jets? Sure, they'd love to wait until after expansion, but there could be consequences, and there's no guarantee that you even get one of those two players to stick around. And if you lose both, now you're scrambling to fill those spots. You have known commodities with Lowry and Stastny. If you have to replace them, that's a challenge.
Well, and we've said this before. I mean, if I were the Edmonton Oilers, I would have a big giant bag of money waiting and ready to go if the Jets tried to go with that scenario, because we've said this before. If you can get Adam Lowry on that team where you're sending out Connor McDavid's line on first and Leon Draisaitl's line second, if you can take Adam Lowry and establish what the Jets have had with him in just a player who can take on one of the other two teams' top lines and shut them down, and make your team harder to play against. Imagine being able to send Leon Draisaitl out against third-line competition. Like, we heard about this earlier today, and an explanation of why Nick Ehlers is a 17-minute man versus a 20-minute man. And essentially what it is Adam Lowry demands a certain amount of time because he can go out, he can grind other players, big or small. I mean, they started him against Suzuki off the draw tonight, if I'm not mistaken. But This is a guy who can grind people down and open up other opportunities for players on your team. I think he would be immensely valuable for a team like Edmonton. The issue that I think that the Jets run into if they try to make that play is that Adam Lowry is probably more valuable to other teams than he is to the Winnipeg Jets from a dollar standpoint. The Jets have a deep team. They have depth down center. If they can keep a guy like Stastny, they've got that. They've got their center depth taken care of. Other teams need a guy like Adam Lowry more than the Winnipeg Jets need them, and that's not saying anything against Lowry. It's saying that he is so valuable that if you can get a piece of what the Winnipeg Jets do to other teams every night, and you're the Edmonton Oilers, I think you fast track to being a way, way better team. So you have to realize that risk is out there. Now, maybe his dad's here. I think there's not a fluke that they brought his dad in, the possibility of being around his parents, and it just makes this more of a home environment, especially because it's been your organization since you were drafted. But if there's a boatload of money that people are willing to throw at you, Adam Lowry hasn't been paid like one of the best players in the league in his time in the league. So if a team was out there willing to make him much richer than he would have expected to be, that may be a temptation he can't turn down.
Yeah, and Edmonton is a great example, Sean, but I would also stick in the province of Alberta, especially with Daryl Sutter taking over in Calgary. Yeah. What kind of a fit is he for his hometown team? I mean, man, you don't know if you're keeping Backlund around long term. I think that Lowry will be a coveted player, not just by the Winnipeg Jets or the Edmonton Oilers or the Calgary Flames. He's a guy that helps a contending team get closer to winning the Stanley Cup. He really does.
Where should we go next here? Don't give away.
Here, hang on. That I want to go to Savard here. Somebody had said.
Yeah, let's go back to Savard.
Here, yeah, this one. I got an easy answer for this one. It's a great theory, and I mean, actually, I had heard in some of the discussions before the trade was made that there was a possibility that David Savard would be included in the deal from some outside sources, but. Here's the thing. The Columbus Blue Jackets were not ready to throw in the towel on the season, Sean. And that's why David Savard wasn't included. They still had designs on being a playoff team.
Right.
So that's why David Savard was not included in the deal. I'm sure the Jets had asked about David Savard at the time, but they were unable to get him. Right now, we know it's been a really tough go in Columbus. And speaking of plugging our show, Sean, we're going to have Aaron Portzline from The Athletic in Columbus join us on Friday for the fourth episode of the Kenny and Rennie Show, and a ton of stuff to talk to him about, including Pierre-Luc Dubois, Patrick Laine, Jack Roslovic, and obviously we're going to ask him about David Savard, the season he's having, and if he believes that Savard is the kind of player that could really benefit and blossom with a change of scenery here during the stretch run and perhaps into the playoffs.
It's interesting because if you're interested in exercising schadenfreude when it comes to Patrick Laine, there's lots of opportunities to do it here. I've seen Jets fans do it. I wonder how many Jets fans, and I'm going to explore this idea on Friday, but I wonder how many Jets fans' hearts are breaking for Patrick Laine. I'm going to tell you this. My wife isn't the most into hockey. She liked Patrick Laine. That other night when he'd come out and he'd said, my confidence is probably somewhere around 0 right now. And I remember saying, I didn't write it. I was going to tweet it. I didn't. I was going to say, book it. Patrick Laine puts up a point tonight, because he always used to do that with us. Remember when he wasn't playing well, when he'd come out and you'd ask him how he was feeling, he'd talk about how terrible his confidence was. And then he'd go out and he'd put up numbers. Well, he goes and does it that night and then ends up, he gets a goal and assist and then ends up riding the pine for the majority of the third period. And he just looked miserable in that post-game press conference. And to bring it back to my wife and my 2 daughters, all they sat there watching the sports and saying, he looks so sad. I feel so bad for Patrick Laine. And I just wonder, my guess is it's a very divided Winnipeg Jets audience on Patrick Laine. Half of them feeling like, yeah, you thought it was bad here. Well, check out what's happening there. But another half that I think really fell in love with Patrick Laine and are looking at the situation there, and just it absolutely breaks their heart to see.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. Patrick Laine was one of the most popular players around here. We know he was great to us in the media. He's a guy who he grew up here. I mean, he came here as an 18-year-old, left as a 22-year-old. They were not the circumstances he would have liked. Again, I think what this, to me, more than anything, I think this shows some of those people that said Paul Maurice is obviously using Patrick Laine incorrectly. That maybe wasn't the case. I think that, it's part of this is a debate for another night when we have been on the air for an hour. I'm just saying that John Tortorella is using Patrick Laine the way that he sees fit also, and it hasn't led to again, you understand it's been a tough go for Patrick Laine. You also know that he's a guy that's going to battle his way through this. He's a guy who loves the game and is determined to be an elite hockey player. Right now we know he's an elite scorer, and I think he gets back on track. I mean, he's such a good shooter. He's not going to go into the corner and pout. He's going to come out swinging, and he's going to do what he can to get himself going again. There's no doubt in my mind.
Okay, we don't have time to get into this because, like you said, we're 15 seconds away from doing this for an hour. But let's get into it on Friday. I want to explore the question and the possibility, and we'll do it with Portsy when he's on. But I want to explore the possibility of Patrick Laine being traded from that team. And I say it like this: what was the reason Patrick Laine had to go? It was because the Winnipeg Jets knew he wasn't going to stay around for a contract extension. And you get into the area where you only have 2 years of team control with him after this season. And if you leave it until the last season, you get into the Jacob Trouba situation, which could be problematic in that, you may not get as much of a return if it's only a 1-year player. Well, if you're not going anywhere and you're the Columbus Blue Jackets and you're starting to look at what's happened in that situation and thinking, essentially, we now have an off season and a year to convince this guy to stick around, and it's not looking like that. You've assumed the same problem that made it so that the Winnipeg Jets needed to move him. You have to get maximum value for him if you know he's not going to stick around. And who right now, raise your hands, thinks Patrick Laine is going to sign long-term with the Columbus Blue Jackets the way things have moved in that direction? I think, and I know it'll be tough to do flat cap scenarios, but if you're a team that needs that guy, and I always come back to the Montreal Canadiens on this with a guy like Suzuki, but if there's a scenario by which you can move money in and out and make that work and throw a whole bunch of prospects, which they have down the road to Columbus to make that deal happen, would it not be a good time to do it at this time of year? Well, we can't get into it. I know we can't. It's too late. I'm gonna. Hey, you.
That's your mic drop right there. That's your mic drop right there.
As the host of this show, I will not give you a forum by which to respond to this. But people, you should show up to our Friday show. We're going to have Aaron Portsline. We're going to explore that exact idea as part of it. And Kenny's going to shoot it down. And it may be like my Kyle Connor theory or my Nick Beavers theory, where I end up looking ridiculous. I don't mind looking ridiculous. Like I said, when we had Elliot Friedman on, I'm a home run hitter when it comes to stuff like this. I swing for the fence. When I connect, it looks awesome. But there's a lot of strikeouts in between that. Everybody,
you're the Rob Deere of our show. You're the Rob Deere of our show.
Man, we so appreciate it that everybody shows up to talk with us here. We absolutely love your comments. It's phenomenal. Great turnout tonight, and you're staying on with us late, half an hour, and it's midnight. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for showing up. If you want to catch this stuff, go to YouTube. Find the Kenny and Rennie shows. If you look in our Twitter timelines, you'll be able to find the connection to it there. But subscribe. We're going to be doing so much more of this live stuff, and it's all going to live there. That's where you got to go find it. We appreciate your time. Kenny, you have anything to say before we go?
No, last word to you. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Tons of fun as always, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
You don't give the last word out very often, so I'm going to take it, and I am going to run with it. Thank you so much, people. We will definitely see you after Wednesday's game for this.
Instagram Live
before the game. You should check that out, too. Really appreciate your time, everybody. Have a great